I need a picture.
You're on. You're on.
Okay. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Independent Producers Organization show. And for this show, I'm going to use my mentor, person I've been admiring all this time. His name's Frosty Wooldridge. Matter of fact, you can go to his website, Frosty Wooldridge, Wooldridge. And he's been way ahead in keeping up with all these things that are going on. For example, the paper, Oregonian, has been recently talking about the damage humans have been doing to this planet. He's been on that for years. He's been talking about that for a long time, and here we are just finding out. But anyway, I'm going to have him in a few minutes, but first I need to talk about the big picture. The big picture is the whole world, everybody in the world is literally expanding and breeding exponentially. And it's just somehow kind of gotten to that point, and it's at a crisis right now. It has to be. We have to hold back, do something to help and slow down this population that's going on and on. To give you an example, there's 59 million people that are homeless, that are moving around the earth. They're homeless. There's no particular place to go. I think one of the examples of that is how they come out of Africa and try to move up to European countries, France, Germany, Spain, anywhere where they can move in and get work and just get more room. They just didn't have room where they were because there's so many of them. You know, even President Trump called attention, who was doing a great job, called attention to how the United States is full. We don't need any more people. We're just, as a matter of fact, we were full some time ago. And this whole thing about overpopulation, I gotta realize that's a word people don't even want to hear because they almost take it personally. Overpopulation, it's not about that. It's about overpopulation, and it's not about immigration. We keep fighting immigration from coming in and all that, but it's really about just having too many people. And what Frosty is going to do is going to talk about the perfect storm over America. That means everything. We're going to run out. Gas and oil is going to become more and more expensive. Running out of water. There has been droughts in different states. There are too many people crowding around in every direction. Of course, there's land shortages and all that, and it's all part of the problem. Another thing we try to blame the government for global warming or climate change. It's us. We're the ones that are having too many children and creating too many people. That's what's creating the weather. And I got 3 words for you: catastrophic, atmospheric, destabilization. And that's what's causing some of the extreme weather that we have. There's another group called negative population growth, and you could look that up on the computer also. They have articles in the paper about the damage to Earth and other things that we can do to solve some of the problems. But the basic thing is that immigration and the immigrants here do not care about what's going on here. They want to come in and they want to get a job, or they want to get on welfare, and they're not thinking about birth control, and they're not trying to limit their population. So that's part of the problem, is getting them to think about that. And think about the fact that there are millions of people waiting to come in to India, from India, into the United States, into China, into the United States, and Africa. There are millions of people there that would come into the United States in a minute if they just could. We have people knocking at our doors all the time. They want in. And there just isn't room for everybody. Only one thing can correct all this: having less people. And by the way, politicians, they do not do anything about it. They just sit there, and they don't want to do anything about it because they think that all those votes are going to keep them in office, and they don't want to have less people because it might affect whether or not they stay in office or something like that. There's hardly one or two politicians all across the United States that really care and understand the problems of overpopulation. And that is a big problem, that our politicians are not into this and don't understand what they should be doing about this. So, in any event, I want to go ahead and have him start this. It's about 40 minutes long. We could go ahead and start that. We'll might be able to have a few words about it later at the end of it.
It's really a pleasure to be with you once again 2 years later. I'm going to bring to you what I consider America's perfect storm in the 21st century. I would like everyone to have the reality or the understanding and appreciation for that we're living on a finite planet. And in this finite planet, we have created the human race that just back in 1900 was 1.5 billion. By 1965, it was 3.5 billion. And today, after Earth Day of 1970, when I was in college, we have doubled from 3.5 billion to 7.3 billion. We're adding 1 billion more people net gain every 12 years. And we will add another 3 billion or more by 2050, which is only 34 years from now. Most Americans, most citizens of the world, and virtually all of the leaders of the world don't give this a thought. But there are a few that do. James Howard Kunstler, a man that I know and have met at population immigration conferences in Washington, D.C., wrote this book, The Long Emergency. And he shows in it what's going to happen to all Western countries and all countries driven by oil, because oil will exhaust itself sometime in this century, and there's no viable alternative energies that will replace this extraordinary energy called oil. If you get a chance, you will be absolutely astounded at what you read. Here's another one by Richard Heinberg, a man I met also in some of the conferences. He wrote Peak Everything. And in Peak Everything, we're literally running out of the metals and the minerals that allow this society to operate. And because of mass population growth, we're seeing that already around the world. As a matter of fact, Chris Clugston, another man I know and have met, wrote Scarcity. And scarcity is about literally everything that drives our civilization and then overshooting it. In other words, having so many humans here in the United States that there's no way that you can produce another battery. You can't get another battery for a phone. You don't have the lithium, you don't have the zinc, the lead, and so forth and so on. Here's one by Heinberg on the energies, whether it's coal, whether it's gas, natural gas, and right on down the line. These are the facts and the research scientists that are really telling us the red lights on the dashboard, the warning signs. Here's Dave Foreman, a man that I've known for many years. He wrote The Man Swarm and the Killing of Wildlife. Throughout the world right now, we're losing, according to Norman Myers of Oxford University, and of course Dave Foreman here in the United States, we're losing 100 species a day from human encroachment on habitat. We're killing 100 million sharks every year in the oceans. That's been going on for over 25 years. We're literally destroying the equilibrium of the oceans, and we're killing off about 250 creatures here in the United States, because the United States grows by 3.1 million every year. And of course, that means we have to, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of ecological footprint. Ecological footprint is, for an Ethiopian, is 0.4 acres. That's how much it takes to have them live and survive. They have a toilet, outhouse, they have their acreage for food, and they have their hut. But when an Ethiopian comes to America, their ecological footprint jumps to 25.4 acres. 25.4 acres. I mean, whoa! It's just humongous, the amount of increase. And so if you take the projected 100 million new immigrants coming to America, as you can see from this graph right here, in the next 34 years, actually in the next 30 years or less, 100 million times 25.4 acres comes out to 2.54 billion acres of land, of wilderness, of habitat, of all the things that make us this beautiful country that we are. And when you take out that much habitat, you cause an increase or an acceleration of species extinction rates, but also you take out all of that wilderness. And this is what's happening all over the world right now as the human race adds 80 million net gain every year. So the animals, what are they going to do? Well, they just go extinct. There's also a book here by a man named Edward Hartman. It's called The Population Fix: Breaking America's Addiction to Population Growth, and why we think we can keep doing this when the numbers show that we can't do it. And sociologically, I heard Governor Lamb's speech in 2003. This makes this book 13 years old. And he had the 8 ways to destroy America via multiculturalism and diversity and celebrating all these cultures, and everybody keeps their own language. And this is one of the greatest speeches of all time, and he allowed me to write the book, Immigration's Unarmed Invasion, Deadly Consequences. And what I'm amazed is how fast it's accelerating across our country. And then 3 years ago or whatever it's been, I wrote America on the Brink, concerning the fact that we're about to add 138 million more people by 2050. Only 34 years from now, we're 26 million into that. We're at 326 million right now. And we're going to go to 438 million. I mean, in a blink of time. And I'm 70 years old, so I think anybody in here that's over 70 knows how fast 30 years goes by. So America on the Brink, the next added 100 million Americans, is a sobering look at our future of essentially hitting that population iceberg. And I also bring solutions. And here's Lester Brown, whom I've also met, Plan B 4.0, mobilizing to save civilization. So you see, there are individuals out there that are stabbing at, doing everything they can to help the human race change course. And so essentially, I'm one of them. And I'm one of them because I care about the future. So what I'm going to share with you this morning is really something that I wish every American could see. I wish every human could see across the planet, and then take action. Because once you know what you know, and it was Einstein who said, you don't know what you don't know. Once you know what you know, then you can do something about it. You can literally save your children's future. You can make impact on the future. Susan B. Anthony did that. Dr. Martin Luther King did that. Certainly George Washington did that. If you look through history, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Abigail Adams, Jane Goodall. You know, I always ask audiences, who was your hero? Or who is your hero? Well, go out and become your own hero and do the same things with your own passions and your own ability. John Muir is my hero. I want to save the wilderness. I give more money to save the redwoods than I give to cancer, because I'd rather save a redwood than the other situations out there. So let's really become alert here in the next 20 minutes, absorb this, and then you can do something about it. And for anybody who would like to, not only does this little business card, and when I started with Numbers USA, I volunteered for them 17 years ago with Roy Beck. We only had 50,000 members. We now have almost 7 million. So, and this is all walks of life, because these numbers are what's going to happen, and this is a future that does not have to happen. And I'm going to explain that today, so that you have an appreciation for that we can change the future. We're a cognitive species. We have the ability to go this way instead of that way. And we can go that way instead of that way. And when you have this kind of knowledge this morning, and I wish this program, I've offered this program, I've gone into Bennett, Senator Bennett, I've gone into Cory Gardner's office, and I said, this is what's coming. And I remember when I did it 3 years ago in Bennett's office, I said, you need to reduce all immigration to less than 100,000 per year, because this is what's going to happen. And I showed the entire staff, black, white, and brown, all these books. I said, these are facts you can't escape. I said, reduce all immigration from the current 1.2 million per year and 500,000 illegals coming across the borders every year, which is 1.7 million in net gain addition to the U.S. I said, because of immigration, I said, drop it to 100,000. What did Senator Bennett do? Does anybody know what he did? He doubled it. Senate Bill 744 jumped it to 2 million immigrants. And now you're going to find out this morning why that was beyond foolish. And then Cory Gardner, when he's got in, and I talked to his staff a year ago, nothing. Both of those men have F- on immigration. So what's happening is the Senate and the House and the last 6 presidents have done nothing for the American people with the most crucial issue of our time, human overpopulation. So let's start out with Cassandra syndrome. Has anybody heard of the Cassandra syndrome?
Heard of Cassandra now.
Okay, Cassandra. Apollo was so infatuated with, I think it was King Priam in Greek mythology. His daughter was Cassandra. She was so beautiful that Apollo gifted her, he was fascinated with her, infatuated with her, in fact. He gifted her with the ability for prophecy. She could tell an event was going to happen, she would tell it, and my gosh, the event came true. But Apollo, being a man, he got real infatuated with Cassandra, pretty much fell in love with her, and she rebuffed him. So at that point in time, he bequeathed to her the ability for prophecy, but he then cursed her with the fact that nobody would believe her prophecies. So that's what happened with Cassandra. It's called the Cassandra syndrome. It's called the Cassandra complex. And that's what we're facing right now. As a matter of fact, it's interesting to note, I've sent this book to Peter Boyles and Krista Kafer and Craig Silverman and Dan, what's his name? Kaplis. And I've sent all of them this book. I said, I'm your local guy here. I'm the expert. I know what's going on. I've got an impeccable resume. I mean, an extraordinary resume. And I said, let's get this issue going. And so all of these characters, Krista Kafer, she saw the brown cloud over Denver, which is going to double in the next 30 years in toxicity. The traffic's going to double, etc. And right on down the line, I-70 going into the mountains will become nothing but a cement gridlock traffic stop. It already is. And all those things, silent assertion. Just ignore it, it'll go away, or we just won't deal with it. So that's what's going on. I've tried to get on 60 Minutes for the last 20 years now. Charlie Rose, for the last 20 years, sent them all this information. Let's make a discussion on human overpopulation in America and internationally. They won't touch it. In fact, there are more people trying to, push immigration into the United States and into Canada and into Europe and into Australia than are trying to say, hey, what are we doing to ourselves? So here's a quote by Dr. Otis Graham, Unguarded Gates. Most Western elites continue urging the wealthy West not to stem the migrant tide that adds 80 million net gain annually to the planet, but to absorb our global brothers and sisters until their horrid ordeal has been endured and shared by all. 10 billion human beings packed onto an ecologically devastated planet, unquote. Just in the last 2 months, I wrote a 4-part series that you can go at newswithviews.com, is where I write for, along with a bunch of other different sites, 20 of them. I'm actually getting invited to write to these sites because I write from the ground level up. I'm a citizen journalist that has seen more of the world than most journalists. I've seen more of the world than George Will or Kathleen Parker or any of those characters. And I've seen America from the vision, if you will, of a truck driver. I ran a rig for United Van Lines in the summers when I was teaching school out in Brighton. I got paid so poorly. So I know the ground level. I've been a bartender, I've been a dance teacher, I've been a heavy equipment operator, you name it. I've had to do that and I've done it. So I know what's going on at the bottom line, whereas most of these guys, George Will, he doesn't know his butt from a hole in the ground. Why? Because he's sitting in a New York apartment and he's writing all these columns and he makes $100,000 a year from those. I'm the character down there that knows what's going on with America because I'm one of you. I got a 13-year-old car. So the key here is that in this latest series I did, it's called The Deadliest Birth Rate for All Humanity. Part 1 was Africa. Africa right now, that's streaming all these refugees into Europe, has 1.1 billion people. Within 34 years, Africa will now jump to 2 billion. 2 billion. By the end of the century, Africa is projected by the United Nations to hit 4 billion. Do you think any amount of immigration is going to save Africa? And will Europe survive any of it if it keeps on doing what it's doing? And of course the answer is no chance. Look at these numbers, they're unbelievable. So then you have India. India right now, 1.252 billion people. You get there, 60% of them don't have a toilet. So they do their business on the land and in the water. The Ganges, which I've been on and afloat, is a sewer pipe. 20,000 square mile dead zone that just contaminates the ocean for 20,000 square miles. Marine vertebrates can't live in it. And that goes on in the Yangtze River also, which I've been on. And yet, they grow by 16 million net gain a year. How do you solve that? Well, we've got Indians flooding into America right now. They've taken over all the motels in America. Indian immigrants. Why? Because we let them. And we're loaning them the money to buy all the rest of the motels. I always ask the question, why do we do that for African Americans? Why not Hispanic Americans? Why are we taking care of somebody else's country? Does it make any sense? Of course it doesn't. And then you look at China. China, with 1 child per family right now, has 1.35 billion people. And yet, because of population momentum, it grows by another 8 million per year, net gain. It will come in at 1.5 billion behind the 1.55 billion of India by 34 years from now. Does anybody think that any kind of immigration to Western countries, which have been having only 2 children, 2.03 children per woman, since 1970, here in the United States, in Canada, in Europe, even less in Europe, 1.6 birth rate levels. Do you think any of us are going to solve all the rest of the world by bringing all the rest of the world's literally unbelievable masses of humanity into our countries or our Europe? And of course the answer is we're solving nothing. So that's the kind of situation. And so and the part 4 of that series, The Deadliest Birth Rate, I just said the Cassandra Syndrome, and then the recipient civilizations, the recipient nations. United States, Canada, Europe, and Australia, New Zealand and so forth. So you can see we're putting ourselves into one heck of a nasty future, because right now we're on course because of mass immigration in the United States. It's 1.2 legal immigrants every year. 500,000 illegals are now pouring into the United States since 2013. According to Dr. Steve Camarata, whom I've also worked with at the Center for Immigration Studies, and that's 500,000 in 2013, 500,000 in 2014, 500,000 in 2015, 500,000 here in 2016. If not for Donald Trump and building that wall, which I just wrote a piece called Build the Wall. Why? We need to stop mass immigration and $50 billion a year Mexico sells America in drugs. It's in my latest column at newswithviews.com. Build the wall. Americans will save trillions of dollars. Go to the thing and you'll sit there and you see the stats and you just go, holy cat. We got 13 kids right now, teens, dying of drugs and alcohol abuse every hour in this country. 13. You've seen the ad on the paper. So what are you going to do when this thing gets to here? Well, just like India or China or Africa, there's no solution. You're in a situation that you can't solve. But what does 138 million more people, what does it seem or look like? Well, it's doubling the populations of our 35 most populated cities. So we're going to double 8.3 million to 16.6 million in New York City. Chicago, 5 million to 10 million. LA, 11 million to 22 million. The state of Florida right now, 18 million, will hit 36 million by 2050. 7 states right now, 7 states have water shortages. Colorado is going to go from 5.1 million to 10 million in a blink of time. Do you think anything will be solved? In fact, I would give you this Al Bartlett, who was a dear friend of mine and died 2 years ago at the University of Colorado. Can you think of any problem in any area of human endeavor on any scale, from microscopic to global, whose long-term solution is in any demonstrable way aided, assisted, or advanced by further increases of population locally, nationally, or globally? Anybody got an idea on that one? How good is it going to be when another 100 million people hit this country? How about 5 million more in Colorado? Is it going to make our roads better? Is it going to make the air cleaner? Is it going to make more abundant water? No. It's going to go that way, folks. So, once these numbers land, it becomes irreversible and unsolvable. Now, let's go to part 2 of this, the perfect storm. Immigration and sociological impact. We're going to get 100 million immigrants from 190 different countries. That's 190 different worldviews. Do you think people just change their worldview because they come to a first world country? Do you think an Ethiopian, a Sudanese, a Somalian? I just visited Detroit, Michigan. It is Dearbornistan. There are mosques everywhere. There's worm writing everywhere. You know what worm writing is? They call it worm writing. It's Arabic. And then the women are wearing little slits for eye. The women are still non-beings. Here in America, they can't change their culture. They don't change their culture. They've got honor killings in Detroit. In fact, when I was there just last week, honor kill in Rocky River, Ohio. Muslim man shot his 17-year-old, I think she was 17-year-old daughter in the bed at night with 2 bullets to make sure she was dead because she was wearing jeans. She was getting too westernized. That's happened dozens of times in this country in the last 15 years, especially since we went. And we've gone from 200 mosques and about 300,000 Muslims in America in 1990. Now we've got between 3.3 and they brag 7 million in this country. We've got 2,400 mosques in the country. Those are territorial markers, just like forts. And they are growing like weeds everywhere in this country. So then we get 190 different worldviews, we get 190 different religions or more, then we get 190 different languages. Right now, if you go to, in fact, I've got this right here, I've got 67% dropout flunk-out rate in Denver public schools. Why? 173.
Give the date.
Oh, this was, I can't even read it.
This is called the Rocky Mountain News.
Yeah.
Monday, May 16, 2005.
2005. I'm a former teacher. We got 173 different languages in Denver public schools. Why do you think there's a 67% dropout flunk-out rate? And as a world traveler on a bicycle, one thing I found about third world countries, what is the one thing that drives third world countries to keep their poverty, to keep their misery, keep their human index, to keep all those new babies added every year? Illiteracy. And we in this country, if you've seen in any of those things on Facebook, there's so many stupid college kids out there that blows your mind. They don't even know what the Civil War was. They don't know who Thomas Jefferson was. They couldn't even name the U.S. Constitution. They don't know where. It's unbelievable to watch this stuff. That's what we're importing into this country. We can't even take care of our own. And how does a constitutional republic operate? How can it survive? It has to have critical thinking citizens, people who can think, who can vote with a critical mind, who can answer questions, who can drive the society forward. We're losing all those factors. And of course, we're also bringing in 190 cultures, displacing our own culture. We keep thinking, oh, they're all going to assimilate. Folks, they're not assimilating. Whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's Colin Kaepernick, or whether it's Brandon Marshall for the Broncos, we are fracturing our ethos in this country. As a matter of fact, Marie Le Pen, who may be the next president of France, said, and I quote, "Immigration is an organized replacement of our population. It threatens our survival as a people. We don't have the means, nor the ones that are, to integrate the ones that are here, and they already don't want to integrate into French society. Immigrants are creating parallel societies. The result is endless cultural conflict." Look at Chicago. Can you solve Chicago's 500 or 600 murders already this year? Can you solve the fact that the schools there are literally just kicking out literally hundreds of thousands of people who have no intellectual horsepower, or very little. They have very poor education. As a matter of fact, do you think New York City is the Big Apple and it's just a wonderful all-American city? It has 800 different spoken languages in New York City right now. 800. Almost 40% of New York City is foreign-born. There are 43 million people in this country today that are born outside of our country. That's how fast they're pouring in with chain migration and all that goes with it. If you look at Chicago or Detroit or Southern California, it shows an unbelievable consequence of multiculturalism and diversity. And in fact, here's a quote. One of the great challenges we're going to have is to survive the Muslim onslaught in this country. Anybody thinks it's going to get easier, it's going to get worse. Here's what the CARE director of the Council on American Islamic Relations said. I quote, "Islam isn't in America to be equal to any faith, but to be dominant. The Quran should be the highest authority in America, and Islam the only accepted religion on earth," unquote. That's assimilation? Those folks are out to conquer the very country that they migrated to. It's called hijra. And the more Barack Obama, who is obviously a Muslim, has got 10 aides in the White House. One of them is called Mohammed Majid. He is the Sharia law advocate. They're already pushing hard for Sharia law in America, which is counter to everything in American U.S. constitutional law. And yet they won't stop. So as you can imagine, we're in trouble. How about the violence of the Muslims? Whether you look at Chattanooga, whether you look at Boston Marathon, you look at San Bernardino, you look at Fort Hood, you look at Fort Dix, you look at all of these, you look at Orlando. I'm on the road bicycling and I hear, oh my gosh. Well, here's the ticket. Unfortunately, the more Muslims we import, the more terror events we import. It's the nature of the religion. It's not going to change because as their numbers grow, so does their push for Sharia law. There's no way to soften their prime directive. Convert or kill all non-believers. One look at Europe shows you our future. In fact, journalist Daniel Greenfield wrote, and I'm quoting, "When you turn on the evening news and see a running death toll, it's happening more and more often. The new brand of Islamic terror only needs one thing: Muslims. Lone wolf terrorism operates off the existing Muslim population in a particular country. The bigger the Muslim population, the bigger the risk. The FBI or other law enforcement agencies cannot monitor even a fraction of the Islamic settler population sympathetic to terror. As the Muslim settler population in a country increases, the number of terrorist events will grow," unquote. That's what we're importing into our country. Now here's one that I think is very important. This was said by Garrett Hardin, the great social scientist. Diversity within a nation destroys the unity and leads to civil wars, he said. Immigration, a benefit during the youth of a nation, can act as a disease in its mature state. Too much internal diversity in large nations has led to violence and disintegration. We are now in the process of destabilizing the United States of America. The magic words of destabilizers are diversity and multiculturalism. I know this is sobering stuff. And I, like Cassandra, see it as clear as a bell because I've traveled through all of these countries. I've seen conflict. I've seen cultural conflict. Languages. Do you think an Arabic person can even think like a modern American? There's not a chance in snowball's chance in hell that all these immigrants... Do you think the Somalians that are in Minneapolis, which I was just in Minneapolis, they call it Somaliland. These people have incredibly low intellectual capacity. They have educational non-existence. They don't even go to school. They don't learn. They can't learn. They won't learn because it's not in their culture. And so they're all on welfare. 9 out of 10 Somalis are on welfare. And the 10th one is the store owner who's selling EBT cards and defrauding you and me, the American taxpayer. I can give you the stories on that. So then you've got Black Lives Matter, and what are they chanting down the streets of Dallas? Death to cops. Another one I heard last week was, what's good about 9 dead cops? The 10th good cop. What's the dead cop? What's the 10th dead cop? The 11th dead cop. That's going on right now. That's what's happening to our country. Then you have the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, just last year, 2 years ago before he died, he wants 5 African separate states. He wants 5 African, he wants South Carolina, he wants Georgia, he wants Alabama, he wants Mississippi, etc., etc. That's already being advocated, and there's others who are going to follow that. So here is a quote by the former Secretary General of INS 20 years ago, 1991. Immigrants devoted to their own cultures and religions are not influenced by the secular, politically correct facade that dominates academia, news media, entertainment, education, religious, and political thinking today. James Walsh said, former Associate General Counsel of the United States Immigration and Naturalization Service, ICE now. I quote again, these immigrants claim the right not to assimilate, and the day is coming when the question will be, how can the United States regulate the defiantly unassimilated cultures, religions, and mores of foreign lands? Such immigrants say their traditions trump U.S. legal systems. Balkanization in the United States has begun. Well, if you take one look at Sweden, the United Kingdom, Norway, Denmark, Finland, Holland, Germany, Italy, Spain, you will see the same thing, and you'll see where we're headed right now. As their numbers grow, ours will continue to diminish. What's part 3 of this perfect storm facing America and our kids? The environment. How do you water, feed, house, warm, and work another 138 million immigrants when we're already facing water shortages in 7 states? How do you deal with the environmental consequences of another 138 million people driving cars? Is it going to make I-70 better? Is it going to make I-25 better? Are we going to have less cars? Are we going to have less brown cloud? I mean, every breath we breathe in Denver right now is filled with toxic particulate, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and hundreds of other chemicals that are just exhausted into the air. And Denver's going to add another 2.5 million people within 30 years. You sit there and you go, is anybody out there thinking? And I tried to get on Channel 9, I tried to get on Channel 7, I tried to get on Channel 6. Aaron Arbor finally said he's going to get me on PBS. I might be giving a program with Governor Lamb in January. I hope to get 3 hours on that. Because this thing, I told you, she's an hour, and then you want the pro-growth people to come up there and battle me for an hour? I can't even get anything said. So anyway, it's going to be interesting if they still want to deal with this. So you can see there's people out there suppressing everything. So now we put on another 138 million people here in the United States. By that time, there's 3 billion more people. There's 3 billion. 3 billion more people, and they all want to come to America. They all want to come to Europe. They all want to come to Canada. Well, folks, where do we go once we're completely overloaded? Because this is leading to 625 million within the next 80 years here in the United States. When we chose 2 children per woman since 1970, the rest of the world steamed and screamed ahead by adding, again, as I said, 3.5 billion, and they're going to 10. So it's not going to be pretty for anybody. Now here's, we keep thinking, well, we're going to have new technologies. We're going to get this, that, and the next thing. Well, the Green Revolution was instigated by a man named Norman Borlaug, and who, while accepting the Nobel Peace Prize in 1970, said, and I quote, "The Green Revolution has won a temporary success in man's war against hunger and deprivation. It has given man a breathing space. If fully implemented, the revolution can provide sufficient food for sustenance during the next 3 decades. But the frightening power of human reproduction must also be curbed. Otherwise, the success of the Green Revolution will be ephemeral only." Guess what? 18 million people starve to death on this planet every year right now. 10 million children, as reported by the United Nations, and 8 million adults. Can you imagine with another 3 billion what those numbers are going to be? So, in coming to an appreciation for what we're facing, what's going on, I've got some solutions, and I think what I appreciate is this. Any culture, that's a country, a culture, that will not defend itself against displacement through mass immigration faces extinction. That includes both time-tested and successful cultures. Rome. Embracing diversity equates to cultural suicide. America's multicultural path guarantees its destruction via cultural clashes and conflict with Islam, Mexican, African cultures that diametrically oppose American culture. The more diverse a country, the more destructive and broken down its future. The more people, the more it destroys its quality of life and standard of living. The more it adds immigrants, the more destruction to its environment. The more it imports refugees, the faster America, Canada, Europe, and Australia lose their own ability to function and their national identities. Exponential growth of any civilization leads to ultimately collapse. That is a scientific, non-negotiable reality. Exponential growth of any civilization leads to collapse. Would you like to be here when that happens, or would you like to change it before it happens? You will see it in Europe. You will see it, and you already see it in Africa, India, and China today. You will see it in Europe, Canada, Australia, and America in the coming years, if Western countries don't stop all forms of immigration. So, pretty harsh, huh? Pretty sobering. Glad I could make your Monday morning so exciting. I could have brought another program called How to Live a Spectacular Life. It seems to really enliven everybody I go to share it with. But what are the solutions? There are solutions. Number one, rescind the 1965 Immigration Reform Act and shut down all immigration into this country. Does that make sense? Why does it make sense? Because the third world doesn't care how many people it's adding every year. 80 million more of them with no end in sight. They will not use birth control. They will not change their cultures. They will not try to save themselves, but they will try to come out to our country or all these Western countries that did choose stable societies since 1970. Number two, engage the McCarran Act of 1952 to stop all Muslim immigration because it is a religious, economic, political system bent on overthrowing the U.S. Constitution. That is a fact. You can't run from it. That is the essence of Islam. It will come in, it will conquer, it will take over, it will dominate, and it will destroy the host country. That's what it's doing all over the world right now. 3, mandate English as the only spoken and written language in America for all communications of government, schools, etc. If you don't have a single unifying language in a country, you no longer have a country. You have cliques and ethnic groups and cultures and biases and different worldviews and everything that doesn't fit into the culture of the country, the ethos of America. That's why it's failing all over Europe right now. If you go up to Vancouver, Canada, right now, the Chinese have totally taken over Vancouver. I've gone up there 7 times in the last 40 years. And Vancouver's no longer a Canadian city. It's Chinese. They own everything. The signage is all Chinese. They speak in Chinese. The schools are in Chinese. They've lost Vancouver, British Columbia, as a Canadian, city. So that's what's coming our way. Finally, we need to create a national, international discussion and a debate on population stabilization, not only here in the United States, but of course worldwide. Without that, we're and our kids and this civilization will not survive what's coming at us. And finally, I would invite you to join numbersusa.org, pick up one of these little deals right here if you so think it's worthwhile. Spread it out to everybody you know. Let's get 10 million, let's get 20 million Americans who care about the future. Also, there's it's called capsweb.org, capsweb.org. I write for them also, run by Joanne Weidman, who is brilliant, and it's Californians for Population Stabilization. California right now is in deep trouble. They've got 38 million people. They add 1,655 more people net gain every day of the year. 98% of them are immigrants, legal and illegal. They will add another 20 million by mid-century, sooner than mid-century. They don't have the water. They don't have the water. And everybody, silent assertion, ignore this. Jerry Moonbeam Brown is an absolute, complete intellectual, it's called an enumerate, mathematically illiterate. The same with Hickenlooper. Hickenlooper's sitting here, and he told last week on NPR, he said, "Oh, we don't want to break up these immigrant families, and we're going to stop Trump from deporting all these people." And he says, "I'm not going to let it happen here." And I wrote that dude. He is out of touch with reality. He was the man who hired the guy that killed Donnie Young in that police shooting that 10 years ago at the Cherry Cricket. I mean, Hickenlooper is guilty of illegal immigration employment himself, and yet now he's going to stop the ICE from deporting and prosecuting illegal aliens because it's a sanctuary city. He does not serve Colorado's best interest because those illegal aliens in this state, whether it's 300,000 or 500,000 or whatever it is, cheat all of us out of our country, out of our schools with 178 different languages or 73 different languages, out of our taxes. I mean, there's $120 billion a year get sent over to other countries every year. I just did a story on it. 120 billion gets sent out of this country in cash transfers by illegal aliens and other immigrants. And 24 billion goes down to Mexico. Well, they sell us $50 billion a year in drugs. Those are the facts. And Hickenlooper's a part of that. So is the Congress. That's why the war on drugs since 1971 has not succeeded, because a lot of big-time leaders are making a lot of money. And that is a reality. And how do I know this? Because I am a ground-level dude. I saw drug stuff go down when I was a trucker for United Van Lines. Every summer I ran that rig, 48 states. I saw drug deals. I saw it all. And why? It's because the border is wide open. How do I know? I've been on the border all the way from Brownsville all the way to San Diego 3 times. Millions of pounds, if not tons of trash. I mean, drug highways just flying back and forth, and nobody to stop it. Barack Obama hasn't done a damn thing since he got into office. George Bush did about as little himself, and we're the ones paying the bill. 350,000 anchor babies every year allowed into this country, and we get to pay for the kids K through 12, we get to pay Section 8 housing, and we get to pay for food stamps, and it just goes on. So anyway, that is the reality we face. Each of you have a choice. Each of you has a choice. You can do something, or you can just watch the United States head into that population immigration iceberg. I hope that you're inspired, that you're activated, that you care enough about the future, that you care enough about your children. And I hope this particular video goes viral, because when people know what they know, then they can take action, change the future, like Susan B. Anthony, like George Washington, like John Muir. We got the national park systems. You can make a difference, you can change the future, and you can get involved, and that's what America's all about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frosty. He really cares about this country, this world, everybody. He really cares about it. And that's how he chose. He bicycles. He's just been everywhere on his bicycle. And when he's not in the, maybe one of the times when he's not on his bicycle, he's underwater looking at the huge quantities of debris that are under the mouths of the Columbia River, the mouths of the Amazon, mouths of the ones from China, from India. They're just filled with garbage. They're just filled. There's just so little you can do about it, and yet you're going to have to think about cleaning it up sooner or later. That's what my feeling. Anyway, you'll notice he had America on the Brink. That was the name of the book that he had written. Frosty Woolridge. It's you got to make an extra effort to get a hold of that, I think. And talking about numbers, Albert Bartlett, an educator, scientist, I think he lived in Colorado. He has had several programs on cable access, in which he has shown how you can't keep expanding the numbers without having problems. So he has done that. He has shown that, you know, what, a cat having 7 kittens, by the time, a little while they have 1 million after that. Well, people are the same way. They say, okay, we'll just have 4. Then those 4 have 4 more. And those 4 have 4 more. People don't realize how this keeps multiplying, and it doesn't stop. And I'd like to talk about Portland a little bit. I don't know if anybody's noticed or not, but all the rents, prices, everything has gone up. And I say it's because of immigration, because it contributes to bring to this everything going higher up. There are more cars all over the place. I drive down and I see rows of cars just parked there, not just driving everywhere, but they're parked. And I go to some of these other places where there's more cars, and there's just more cars than ever. And then, of course, there's the complaints about congestion. Well, all they have, I'll admit, I'd love to go down to the city council and say, don't you understand that we have to do something about the number of people in the city to reduce that? Then we'll have, if we do that, we have less people here, there'll be less congestion, less cars, less everything. And of course, that is, I just know if I did that, it wouldn't go over very big. They just ignore that. Nobody pays any attention. But Frosty, like I say, this Bartlett shows, they can show arithmetically that increasing the number of people, it won't let up. You'll have problems that you can't deal with. And one of these, a Nobel winner, said that if we don't do something about population to calm it down, to reduce it, then what happens later won't be pretty. It'll be Mother Nature taking over and destroying, because there's so many people and they don't have anything else. You know, you probably never even heard of this, but there's actually something called the 6th extinction of humans. That means there's been 5 before this on this planet. So the 6th extinction is what they're thinking about now. And geez, all we have to do is have less people. That's all we have to do, is just think in terms of not having so many people all the time. And when Frosty said there are 80 million additional people, babies, whatever, net every year on this earth. That's something to think about. What can we do about that? I believe that the Trump administration is in charge of removing the global gag rule that stops funds from going to other places to help with birth control. I think that should be resumed. There should be more of that. That's all there is to that. And incidentally, the Border Patrol estimates that 1,500 illegal aliens jump our borders every single night of the year. I can't imagine where all those people go, but they have to find people they know to go to, and it isn't going to be stopping anytime soon. That's why there's certainly no reason not to have Trump and continue to have border, the Army and Marines placed on the border to keep people from coming in. I know that our service people say they don't like to be on our country and fighting. It's more important than that. They have to be there to keep them out. We have to protect our country. There's just no correction. You have to think in terms of, well, what will happen if it comes right down to us? Where will we go? Where will people that you know in your neighborhood, where will they go if there's no more room because there's so many people? All we have to do is figure out how to cut down the number of people, but through birth control, all forms of birth control. It just has to be something like that. And so I hope that people have a chance to think about what they have heard Frosty say tonight. And I do want to close the program now because I need to thank our crew for handling all this perfectly and making this possible. So I really do appreciate that. And I'd love to have Frosty again on another call in another time. He always has some really, shall we say, hot stuff, because he's trying to keep the country and the human race together. It's one of the things I appreciate about him. He's just an excellent mentor for me. That's all I know. And I really appreciate that also.